All right, here we go. Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
Live from the basement of the YouTube headquarters, it's the Stacking Benjamin Show. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. On today's roundtable, is being responsible with your money making you miserable? We'll help you learn when to go easy on yourself with the man whose mood is unchanged by his spending habits or pretty much anything else for that matter. It's OG. Plus, a guy who helps people be responsible with their future money. It's the host of the Inspired Money podcast, Andy Wang. And finally, a woman who will help you get out of being miserably in debt. It's award-winning author, Erin Skye Kelly. But that's not all. Halfway through the show, I'll share my sky-high trivia. They should have seen me at Coachella last year. Anyway, and now a guy who's responsible for us all being here. Wait, are you my real dad, Joe? It's Joe Saul-Sehy.
That could get awkward, Doug. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Friday
Dad?
on the Stacking Benjamin Show.
You missed my Little League game.
I am not Doug's father. Joe Saul-Sehy.
So says Maury Povich.
So says, yes. And Doug, that we should do that. We talked about this in Nepal.
We should all have paternity tests? No. 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 Bad idea.
No, we should do a money geek version of like Maury Povich, where we're like, Erin, we looked at the results. That is your credit report.
We saw your American Express bill. You did buy those Kewpie dolls.
Yes, and we're going to introduce you to Erin and Andy here in a second. But before we do anything, this episode is brought to you by State Farm. If you own a small business, whatever your business might be, you need somebody who understands. And that's where State Farm Small Business Insurance comes in. State Farm agents, they're business owners too, and they know what it takes. They can help you choose personalized policies that fit your business. Small business insurance from State Farm, like a good neighbor. State Farm is there. Talk to your local agent today. All right, we're going to talk money and happiness. We're going to get philosophical. So let's be literal, though, first with the introductions. We saw OG initially across the table from me. How are you, man?
Perfecto. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm better now that you're here. And I'm even better that these two people are here. First of all, joining us from way up north, where spring will be here in maybe, 2 or 3 months. It's our good friend, Erin Skye Kelly's here. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited for today.
Do you wear mittens outside still in Canada this time of year?
Yes. And socks around the house until about June.
About June. And that goes to like July 30th.
Yep. Flip-flop season is 5 weeks long.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. And so for people that don't know about you getting the hell out of debt and about Naked Money meetings, tell everybody about the brand, Erin.
Well, I'm unfortunately a product of my own brand, because at one point in my life, I was $2.1 million in debt.
Is that all?
And did not know what to do. And so could not figure out how to get the proper help. And for a long time, the help I was getting was just putting me into more debt just for longer amortizations. And I didn't know what that word meant. I didn't understand any of that stuff. So Get the Hell Out of Debt is a podcast and a program and a book and everything you need if you're struggling with consumer debt. And Naked Money meetings is really all about the psychology behind why you self-sabotage your way to wealth. So that's it.
And we do it so often.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you are so good. What you are so good at is you're great at mirroring both that financial education piece with that mindset piece. That's why you're a genius. I shouldn't start with the compliments.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Are you talking to me? Stop. Let's talk about that for a while, Erin.
I'm busy.
Yes. Well, I'm super happy. And by the way, for people that want to see both of Erin's discussions on Naked Money meetings and Getting the Hell Out of Debt, we'll link to those appearances on our show notes page. But also here, the man behind Inspired Money, and man, his YouTube live. We're doing this live on YouTube, and I got to say, I was just on his YouTube live. Andy, I want to burn my YouTube and just use your YouTube. Like, your YouTube is so much better produced than what we do. Andy Wang's here from Inspired Money. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for the kind words. We're trying to up the production and improve the show.
It's incredible. He's got like B-roll between the segments. He's got this official, we are not worthy, Andy.
I mean, he just has a
like
better
any other
better
live
camera.
show. We've had like, train wreck episodes that have happened where nothing worked, files didn't upload, couldn't play back anything. But it's live. The show must go on.
Well, tell everybody what happens at Inspire Money, because it truly does inspire a lot of people. I'm
a longtime financial advisor. Inspired Money was like half passion project and then trying to include my day job. I did about 5 years of one-on-one interviews looking for inspired money stories. You were a guest. But about 6 months ago, changed the format into a panel style like this roundtable. And we're really trying to bring a group of experts in to explore different ways that we can make more, give more, and live more. So earlier today, we talked about real estate investing. Sometimes we talk about stock investing. Other times we're going to talk about philanthropy and giving away money and why that's good for our personal finances. And then live more. I get to interview people about wine collecting, watches, collectible cars. So it's like a really diverse group of topics, and it's been a lot of fun so far.
That's what I like it. You had me at wine collecting right there. That's it.
Although from a guy who doesn't drink wine. So it's been really interesting.
Well, I make it up for you because I
think Joe and I got you covered, bro.
Right.
Thank you.
It's the collecting part, OG, we have a problem with. Like, we're looking at the bottom of the thing, and we're like, oh, we were supposed to collect that.
They're hoping that they're hoping the
bottle.
empty bottles are worth something, like kids collecting beer cans in the 70s.
Yeah. Right. We just pile them up like a big tower.
Yes. We're happy that day, maybe not so happy the next day. And that's actually the topic we're going to dive into today is money and happiness. Our friend Katie over at Money with Katie, another fantastic podcast and part of Morning Brew. Katie wrote a piece that we really like that we're going to dive into about, is being great with money making you miserable? We'll talk about that. So let's get moving because we got Andy here. We got Erin. We got Neighbor Doug. We got OG. Let's roll. As I mentioned, our piece comes to us from Money with Katie. And you know what, Stackers, you don't have to have this piece in front of you. If you do want it in front of you, head to our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com. But as I also mentioned, is being good with money making you miserable? Katie writes, I used to be basically unaware of my financial standing. My Discover bills and rent were always paid on time, but I couldn't tell you how much I was saving or what my net worth was. As such, my purchases were relatively low drama affairs, desire, swipe, move on, only to be reminded 3 weeks later when the credit card statement came and I sweatily cross-referenced my checking account balance with the total due. I want to ask all you guys, because you're clearly three people that are good with money now. I don't know if you've always been good with money, but I do think that a recurring theme on this show is most people had this aha moment. They had this aha time, or maybe it was, this could have been in middle school, could have been in high school, could have been whenever, could have been yesterday. But Erin, let's start with you, because I don't, Katie's writing about how her Discover bill, she didn't know what it was. I don't think you ran up $2.1 million on Discover. Like, when did you get to the point when you're like, you know what, I can be good at this? Like, what was the turning point?
Well, I think first I had to do what she's describing, which is sort of that blissful unawares. That was a fun place to be before you know really how bad it is, right? Because you're like, oh, I'll just take a little from here, and then you're transferring balances, and you're thinking you're smart because you're just looking at the interest rate versus the total cost of borrowing, and that's a really fun, happy place to be. And so I totally live there. And I think for me, I know that my number is really high and it's intimidating for a lot of people, but it doesn't matter what your number is. If your number is more than you can pay off, it's a problem. And it feels the same way in your body once you have that realization, I think, for most people. But mine wasn't all, trips to the mall or, whatever we were doing back in the 90s and early noughts. But it was a lot of not understanding what an actual asset was. And I was borrowing for liabilities that I thought were assets. And what do
you mean? Like, what type of stuff are you talking about?
Well, I think, even in terms of like, when we look at real estate, right, I'll often ask people, is real estate an asset? And most people go, yeah, it is. but it's an asset with conditions. It's only an asset under certain circumstances, right? It's only an asset if it's providing cash flow, or it's, there's a number of different circumstances we would use to describe it actually being an asset now. But back then you think, oh, my home is an asset, or my car is an asset, or, I need these certain things for work, or I need this education or this course or this whatever, and it's going to be an asset. Not really understanding that it's taking money out of your pocket all the time, and I'm borrowing to do it. I'm putting it on a credit card, or I'm leveraging something in order to pay for it. So it's almost like a double whammy, right? It's losing value, and it's got an interest cost, and it's depreciating in a lot of cases. So I think just that lack of awareness I was so happy. I thought I was accumulating all these, I had so many credit card points. I was like killing it, I thought.
But what happened though? Did something slap you over the head?
Well, I think it was just this moment where I started to, like, the squeeze got to be too much. Like, there just wasn't enough cash flow, and I was running out of room in certain places. And it just was getting to this place where, and then the government was calling because they wanted these taxes that I, was falling behind on, and all kinds of things. And then it quickly got out of hand. And so I added it all up. And that was the moment for me where I was like, oh, actually, this is really bad. So I think it was just that for me, it was the pressure of realizing I couldn't ignore it any longer. I couldn't play that game of trying to pretend it was okay when I just wasn't really looking at what was actually happening. And then the realization when you kind of have that moment with yourself where you're like, okay, I'm going to get really viciously honest with myself, and I'm going to look at what's actually happening. I'm going to lay it all out. I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to pretend it's better than it is. I'm going to look at what's really happening. And that for me was like, okay, I have to do something about this. It's
a horrifying moment. And in hindsight, a great moment. Because it was the same for me, Erin. I was like, maybe if I don't look at it, it will get better. And I got to tell you, that's like the worst strategy. That is the worst. Believe it or not, that one didn't work. Andy, what was your moment? Was it early on? Was it later on?
Really interesting. I think it was later on. And I think just in looking at this article, like, my initial gut reaction was like, wow, Katie has a high class problem. Like knowing about her financial situation is making her have more stress. And I think as a financial advisor working with different people, most of the time I see the opposite, right? Like, I'm seeing peace of mind as the result of people looking at their finances and planning. And it's the not knowing that causes stress. So as I thought about it a little bit more, then I was like, okay, well, maybe, I have to appreciate or acknowledge that there are different money personalities. And so for me, it's like there are spenders, there are savers. I tend to be a saver. Like, I used to ask Inspired Money guests, what was your earliest childhood memory of money? And mine was getting my first passbook checking account, depositing some money that I got for birthdays and Chinese New Year, and immediately seeing the interest that showed up in my account immediately. I'm like, ooh, look, 3 pennies. That came out of nowhere. And I think that for me, it's like, okay, I'm a saver. My wife is more of a spender. She had found herself, I guess, victim of retail therapy more than me. And so that was my aha moment. The fact that my wife and I have different money personalities, and then we can hopefully help each other with our strengths and weaknesses. So she can teach me, yes, it's okay to turn the air conditioning on in the summertime. You don't need to be having 5 blankets in the winter.
Hold on, Andy. You being good with money is making her miserable, is what you're saying.
Yeah, could be. And then I think years later, we've been married a long time now. She's like, I'm finally realizing, and I want to teach this to our kids, that you don't need to buy things to make yourself feel better. Be very, thoughtful about what your purchases are, and take your time to think about it. Only buy things you need and appreciate and try to own less. So I think that we're trying to balance that out between the two of us.
It is funny because when I was a financial planner, we'll ask you this too, OG. I saw the exact opposite of what Katie's talking about, to your point. What I love about this piece, though, is there's a much bigger segment of people that listen to financial shows that are on Katie's bandwagon. They don't spend money on anything. They regret every purchase. They end up with less life because of the fact, and they end up feeling miserable and this guilt because they're like, I just can't get myself to spend money, you know? OG, how about you? When was your turning point?
Yeah, I was going to say it's like the pendulum swings both ways, right? Like you have some sort of experience early on, whether positive or negative. And a lot of times if you have some negative money stuff early, whether it's, in your formative years and that's kind of your experience, maybe growing up and maybe money was a bad topic or there wasn't enough of it or something like that. And then you think, okay, that's not going to be me. I'm going to go the other direction. And you go the other direction, but you go to the other direction so far that you've just created another problem. It's just different. It's just a different problem on the other side of it. I've kind of done all of those things over my lifetime. I've always had the phrase, we love this show, Arrested Development. And I've always had the phrase, there's always money in the banana stand. Like that is my motto in life. I don't know if I could have a credo, that would be OG's credo. There's always money in the banana stand. But being an entrepreneur and always, I was talking to a banker yesterday about something different. And we were talking about just kind of upbringing with money. And I've never had a W-2 job. Like everything I've always done has been results based since I was 11. Deliver papers faster, get more subscribers, you will make more money. You want to make more money, sell more shoes, have more tables at the restaurant. When I was doing that, when I was working at the shoe store, it's like everything was tied to performance. So I always felt more in control. But the downside to that happened to me was that it was literally that feeling of like, oh, it'll be fine. It doesn't matter what I do today. It doesn't matter what the Discover Card bill is because maybe I'll make it this month or maybe I won't. Doesn't matter. Eventually I will, and eventually it'll be fine. And, that's kind of that, that pendulum going both directions, along the way. So, at the end of the day, it's, I think, knowing yourself and recognizing, a little bit around how you think about money and how you, how your upbringing has been. And trying to decide what's the best for you and for your family.
But for people that don't know your story, when did you get the aha that, this wasn't the answer. And now I can be good with asset gathering and not just hustle.
Yeah. Probably tomorrow would be a good time for that. No,
it's on the way.
I think there was a moment. I don't know if it was the moment, but when we moved from Michigan to Texas, we moved 11 years ago. We basically sold, the only thing that we had, which was our house, right? And it was like, oh, we'll just live in this apartment for a little bit of time, and we'll just go buy another house. But our house had started at one value when we bought it. It got cut in half because of the recession in the late 2000s, and then back to even money. And we had a really awesome thing called interest only mortgage. So basically, we made no progress on our house. We owned it for 10 years and had made no progress. But then when we moved to Texas and living in the apartment and having that shrunk down lifestyle, and then literally being able to go, okay, gosh, there's extra money. We paid off all of our debt and saved $100K to use as a down payment on our new house in 15 months, which was way longer than I thought we were going to live in the apartment, by the way. I thought we were going to live in the apartment, 5 months, 6 months, buy a house, whatever. But just I guess maybe for us that it was resetting, right? It was just going, okay, you need to right size everything back to where you should be based on your income and your lifestyle, and that forcing mechanism of basically having a house and mortgage and taxes and all that sort of stuff down to now you just rent an apartment, all included. That freed up that capacity. Thankfully, we were smart enough to keep our lifestyle in check so that that money went to savings, but it was also somewhat focused, right? We're like, all right, we got to pay off student loans and pay off credit cards and so on and so forth. But it wasn't necessarily intentional. It was more like it just happened. And by the grace of whomever, like somehow we did it right, I think, along the way.
I don't know, but you get these ahas, you get these lessons. Like, I think the thing that a lot of stackers don't know is what you experience, which is that one decision. Like, everybody's focused on, these little tiny $3, $4, $5 decisions. That one decision about your housing cost makes everything. I mean, that can make up for so many ills. You could mess up so many things. If you get that thing right, it's going to cover all those bases. Erin, I want to go back to you for a second, because you said something that was interesting, which was that, early on, you thought you were savvy because I could take money from this hand and put it in that hand. That seems like what a CFO does, right? I mean, these geniuses can move the debt around and then show up on the annual report and it all looks good. Are there other things that you used to think were really savvy that now, looking back on it, you're like, that's not savvy, or that's something I wasted time on that was probably a little irrelevant?
Well, I think what's the big difference between what you're talking about, what I was doing, is you're talking about like asset allocation and, really being strategic and paying attention to the numbers. I was simply like balance transferring. And I used to think that was so genius. You know what I mean? I was like, I can go from this percent rate to 0%, but I didn't look at all the other fees or the hidden costs associated with doing that. And I thought that was a smart move, but because I wasn't tracking my net worth or paying attention to those details, I didn't know that all I was doing was moving it around. It's like brushing your teeth and eating Oreos. Like, you're just moving the mess around. You're not actually accomplishing anything. And so when I understood what a net worth is, and I understood, a balance transfer doesn't change my net worth. It doesn't make me wealthier. And then understanding the cash flow equation and how, cash, when my budget's entire job is to make my net worth go up, and started to kind of put those pieces together. That's really where I was able to kind of shift from that, like transferring money, moving it around, feeling like I was making smart financial decisions, to actually understanding asset allocation and doing smart financial transactions. So it was a literacy problem, I think, in a lot of cases. But sure, there's so many, like, if you gave me a list of the top 100 stupid financial things people did, I would have 100%. I was like, I tried it all. I did. And sometimes it was just like out of pure desperation, but sometimes like I was so confused and so lost, and I just I would trust anybody. So I was taking advice from people who I'm like, I look at their lives now and I'm like, ooh, that could have been a big disaster. People who are in a worse position today, just water cooler talk about invest in this and do this. And, and I was like, oh, that sounds like a great idea, because I was so desperate for anything.
Yes.
And so I really took a lot. I made every possible mistake, but that's what's really great about being on this side now, is I can spot good advice like this.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to do, is if we've got a 25-year-old stacker right now, Erin, I'll give you an example of one thing that I used to think was brilliant when I first became a financial planner, and even before that I think is so relevant right now. And that is watching CNBC and watching these people go on and on about what happened today in the stock market. Like, I used to think that for me to be educated, that was the first thing I should do. And man, I would not only, do that, I would read the Wall Street Journal, but I was on this whole macro kick that for my own personal, I'm running up credit card debt like nobody's business, but I know every single thing that's going on with, P ratios of the average stock in the S&P 500. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
you're like your own seeking alpha. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
If I'm talking to a 25-year-old, I'm like, turn off CNBC and figure out your credit card problem. Like, what's something like that for you that you used to think was a big aha that now you're like, 25-year-old, please don't do that?
Yeah, well, I think the two most impactful financial tools you can have, and you use them whether you're starting out, you use them whether you've got debt, or you use them whether you're building wealth, is the combination of the net worth and the budget. And I don't care if you use an app or a journal or a spreadsheet, I don't care what you use, but if you understand that you have a monetary worth, and this is not a conversation about your intrinsic worth at all, because some people hear this and they're like, but I'm worth so much more. You are. It's true.
Correct.
Okay? And we need to know your assets and your liabilities. It's like the starting point on your journey. Like, if you're going Pokemon hunting, for example, you got to know, if you're going after Jigglypuff, Pokemon has to figure out where you're at today in order to get you there, right?
You have no idea what you're talking about, do you? Have you ever hunted Pokemon ever in your life?
Level 32. I have 4 teenagers, just so you know. I'm on level 32. Jigglypuff. Look it up. It's a real thing.
Doug has no idea.
But if you have, let's say, Doug, you're going to go on a cruise. Okay. And I'm your travel agent and you want to book, this analogy, right? I got to know where you're at today in order to get you on that cruise ship. That's part of the journey, right? I can't just give you the cruise ship details. I have to figure out where you are today.
Hanging out with
it's such an important tool. It's such an important tool.
That's where I am.
To really help you go, okay, this is the starting point. And what's cool is once you're wealthy, and we see this over and over again with the women and the people that I work with, is they're all so glad that they had that starting number to see how far they've come. Because one of the things with any growth, whether it be personal growth or physical growth or anything, right? Like you remember I was a big chubster for a while there, right? I love knowing what that old number was because it makes me feel like a skinny hot bitch right now, right? Even though I'm not. But I love to be able to have, if I didn't have that number, if I just ignored what was going on for so long, right? I would have just kept going up and up and up. Right. So that net worth number is so critical to really, not only for you while you're learning, but then when you do enlist a financial planner or you do have an accountant or you have a realtor or a mortgage broker, you're all going to be able to speak the same language because you're going to be talking about the same thing. So that net worth number is so important. But then the budget is the other piece, the income versus the expenses and the difference between those numbers and how you can make tiny choices and those big decisions that you're talking about and how they impact that net worth. But honest to goodness, I don't think I know anybody who's built a successful financial life that doesn't have a handle on those two things. And so anything else you do, I think it's just like, it's fluff. It doesn't matter until you know those two things.
Forget everything else. Focus on those.
I just think, And then you start watching CNBC because it'll have some relevance to what you're doing. But if you don't have any idea what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve, it's talking heads otherwise.
Andy, for you, what did you think when you were 25 and knew everything was important that now you're like, yeah, maybe not?
Well, before getting into that, shout out to Erin's Pokemon references. I know nothing about Pokemon, but my teenage son, he went to New York City last summer to like this live event where there was like in-person battles and characters you could get your photos with. It was crazy.
Doug wants to know the address because by the look on his face, he's going to be there next year.
No, it'll be somewhere different. It's always moving, Doug. It's always moving. You got to be.
He'll go wherever Jigglypuff is.
You got to go on tour. It's like Fish or the Grateful Dead.
Doug's like a carny for Jigglypuff.
So yeah, when I think back to like my 25-year-old self, I mean, that goes back to the days where for me, because I was a saver, I figured I didn't really need to pay that much attention because the key is just spend as little as possible and just, put your paycheck into the bank. I think the advice is that tracking one's money is a really useful practice. Because I think most people know how much they make. Too few people know where the money's going every month. Like what percentage is going towards food, how much is going towards your house, where you're living, and transportation and food. And those are like the big ones, right? It's your housing, your transportation, your food, maybe medical. And it's a moving target because it's always changing. Like food right now has gone up a lot. We've all seen food inflation. I think food prices have gone up almost 6% last year. And that's more than average inflation, which I think was 3.4%. So I think it's important just to know where your money is going. And it's less threatening than the budgeting word.
Right.
Because people find that intimidating. Like, oh my gosh, a budget could be constrictive and not fun. And I don't want to do that. Which goes a little bit to this article, right? It's like, is paying too much attention to your money going to make you miserable? Budgeting could make you miserable. It's just not fun. But I like the idea of just tracking. Just track for a month, track for a second month, and then you can identify trends. Where can you make improvements? And it's just not as threatening. So I think that's a useful one, either when you're 25 or when you're in your 50s like me, because I'm trying to save my money for 3 college tuitions that scare the bejesus out of me. My wife is tracking all our expenses, looking at our budget, and she's like, okay, family, let's limit how many times we're going out to eat, because a family of 5 adds up really quickly. So we're trying to bank some money for the colleges before they take all our money.
Well, it's funny you talk about food cost and grocery bills going up by 6%, Andy. I think for me, that's something that at 25, I used to think was relevant, that is, on a macro level, that's happening. That is irrelevant. How much money I spend on groceries and how much that's gone up is super important, because it's specific to me, instead of, here's what's going on with everybody, which I thought I was a genius for knowing that. At the same time, I'm racking up debt because I have no idea where my money's going. OG, how about you? Something you thought was genius that maybe not?
Well, I don't know that I did anything really that was even in the ballpark of genius when I was in my 20s. It was, in retrospect, a comedy of errors at every level, basically. And now I look back and it's just funny because you get the benefit of hindsight and you just think like, I started doing this work in the late 90s, which is roughly about the time when the Roth IRA first started. And back in the day, it was a $2,000 maximum. Joe, you remember this? Andy, probably. Which was $166.67 a month. Like that was the number to max out your Roth. And I remember thinking like, oh, that's so insignificant. Like I can skip this year. I don't have to do, like, I'll just do next year, maybe sometime, maybe not next year either, but sometime in the future, I'll do that. And now I look back and I'm like, what the heck did I have going on that was so important? I didn't have $100, like $100. I mean, that's not zero. It's some money, right? But in the context of life, just go $100, man. Like I couldn't have made an extra $100. I couldn't have done something extra for $100 this month to do that. It's like that would have had such a huge trajectory change in terms of net worth. And we just don't see the ability. We don't have the ability to see compounding in the future. It's just not a thing that our brains can really comprehend very well. So we can see it in the rearview mirror very easily. But Erin, to like what you were talking about in terms of progress, and you can't measure progress into the future. You can only measure it when looking backwards. That's a reference point for progress generally. But it's hard to
defend ourselves.
It's hard to see that. Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
To defend ourselves, I just want to say quickly that 20-year-olds today have so much more knowledge, like us and our dial-up modems. That's why we had a comedy of errors. Like we didn't know what was going on. There's so many more resources now.
Yeah. Well, you're right. But I was doing this when I was 21. So allegedly I knew everything, right? I was a financial planner. So I should have known better. And so I see a lot of despair from people today who, are maybe 40 or 45 or 50 that are like, I have totally screwed up the last 30 years of my life. Like I am beyond hope. There's nothing for me to do. Like there's no way to solve this problem. And I think, when I look at that, I think you have so much more time than you think because of the power of compounding. And by the way, generally speaking, when you're in your 40s and 50s, you're kind of at your peak earning years. So you definitely have some more, your peak spending years too. Andy, like, and Erin, I don't know how old your kids are, but college is this real thing that is profoundly emotional in terms of its cost. I read the other day that the University of Pennsylvania is now a mere $92,000 per year.
But Erin's in Canada. Isn't it all free up there?
Oh, in Canada land, it's less expensive. They pay in loonies and toonsies up there, or whatever they're called.
It's all fake money. It's
all fake money anyway.
Monopoly money.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Erin gets a handful of Monopoly money and she's good.
Here's this. We're good. Great. But so you have so much more time. You have more time than you think, and you have so much more flexibility. Don't give up. If you're like 45 and you're like, I haven't done anything yet, I think you have so much opportunity, even if the last 20 years have been sucky. Like those are all lessons. You You have learnings and lessons, like that was or growings and lessons, right? You either grew or you had a learning right there. And that was a learning for 20 years. And now you can work on that to grow for the next 20 years. So,
yeah, I wanted to start there, guys, because of the fact that you guys were able to either A, turn it around or B, keep the ship running. And there's the other side of that now, which we're going to explore in the second half, which is Katie talks about the fact that now you're a good saver. And now, does keeping track of every nickel drive you crazy? Is the fact that you have trouble spending money driving you crazy? Is the fact that you are good with money make you so neurotic that now it's kind of like the more you know, the less you know. The more you know about great money habits, the more you know all the things that could happen. And because you know all these things that could happen, you're always looking over your shoulder. Like, what are the things? What I love is that Katie says she's not a fan at all of it's about balance. And she writes that you're going to be militant in most areas, but not in one, like as an example. And she didn't write this. This is what I grok from this. Like, it makes you say, I'm going to count every penny except when it comes to travel, and then I'm going to have a good time. And then the average money geek, and we all know these people, average money geek goes, well, wait a minute, when does travel end and being great with money? So I'm going to travel and that'll be a treat, but I think I'll stay in a tent because that's now my lodging. Or maybe I won't go out to restaurants. I'll go on, and next thing you know, you're ruining the trip for everybody around you because you're still a money geek and you're making yourself miserable and everybody else. We're going to attack that part. How do you give yourself grace? And what do you do if you are good with money to keep yourself happy? But before we get to that, at the halfway point of every Friday show, we have this amazing competition between our frequent contributors. And today, OG is here. Erin, you'll play on behalf of Paula Pant from Afford Anything. And Andy, you're going to play on behalf of Mom, who never comes down to do it. She always has somebody who's going to sit in for her. So congratulations. That's you.
Charity case usually.
Yeah.
Go to your room, Joe.
Erin, that hits close to home, Andy. Erin, we've got some good news and some bad news about playing for Paula. Do you want the good news or the bad news?
Oh, I want the good news.
The good news is you are in first place, girlfriend, because you've got 6 so far this year. Joe's mom has 5, and OG, who's our 2-time champion, has 4. So that's the case. I have too much
respect for Paula to let her down.
Well, that is the good news, is you're in first place, but that brings up the bad news. That means you're going to have to guess first this week, okay, Erin. And so right, I feel bad. The woman who's making her debut on the Friday Roundtable has to go first.
Sorry, Paula.
But we need
Sorry.
We need a question, Doug. What's today's trivia question?
Have I got a question for the stackers? Hey, everybody, I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. On this day in 1870, the U.S. closed down the New Orleans Mint.
That's how you pronounce that.
New Orleans? Nolans. We're going Nolans. The Nolans Mint. I bet it was because the humidity down there was making all the bills too soggy. Speaking of mint, I've always enjoyed having a nice, cold mint julep in the summer. One year I opened up my own mint julep stand right at the end of my driveway. It was pretty successful until the neighborhood kids came by and threatened to call the cops. They were just jealous that I was out earning their stupid lemonade stand across the street 2-1. Regardless, in the spirit of fair play, I told them the secret was to add gin to the recipe.
That's good.
Look, it couldn't have been more than like 20 minutes before one of their moms, probably named Karen, stormed over accusing me of corrupting kids. I tried explaining to her that I never suggested they drink the booze, only sell it. I offered her one in the house to calm her down, but that only made her hotter. You know what I mean. So I had to shut that down. Had to shut down my making mint julep booth based on how well it was going. That's like the U.S. Mint shutting down operations because, man, I was just printing money. Speaking of printing money, here's today's trivia question. If you were to build a stack of all the Benjamins that are currently in circulation, how tall would that stack be? I'll be back right after I have Joe's mom record my height on her kitchen wall. I've definitely gotten taller since last year. No, not because of the shoes.
I just realized, Doug, I love the fact that we do stacking U.S. money trivia, and we're going to ask the Canadian woman to go first.
Yeah. Well, I know this answer, so it's fine. Yes.
She's got the perfect.
I happen to know.
It's in feet, Erin. We're doing it in feet, not the metric system or whatever. Yes.
Well, it's going to go all the way to Uranus. So
okay. Okay.
However far that is.
Oh boy.
Yeah, you betcha. I think the Stars are going to beat the Oilers then.
Do you need a numerical number?
Did the stack poke Uranus?
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Man.
Pull up. Terrain.
We just drove this car right off the side, Erin. Yes, you need a actual number.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the distance is probably 89 million miles.
It's in feet. We're going to go feet.
Oh. 34 feet.
34.
Okay, then. Wow.
Listen, I lost this for Paula the minute I started, so it doesn't matter. Paula, 34 feet, final answer.
89 million to 34 feet.
89 million miles. Which is just a simple times 5,208, easy.
Look, now you're showing off.
And we thought Doc G was good at this game. Andy, you are second, my friend, 34 feet. You think it's more or less?
I think it's more. I'll go with 5,000 feet.
5,000 feet. OG?
Okay, so every bill is how thick, do you think? Or a stack of hundreds, is like that? Does that seem about right?
And Doug and I knew that you would question this premise.
Yep.
So these are brand new Benjamins.
Brand new Benjamins laid really belly to belly.
Yeah, these are not wadded up in Andy's.
It's not like around the world, like touching end to end. This is like a stack of Benjis on top of a stack on top of a stack on top of a stack.
That's correct.
All of the Benjis in the entire circulation in the world presently, or in the United States?
In the world.
All. Okay.
Yep.
The $100 bill is
House of Ill Repute in the Philippines. Those two. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I do believe oddly specific. TM, how did you know they were called the House of Ill Repute?
Oh, no.
You had to have been there. Only people that have been to the House of Ill Repute know that it's called the House of Ill Repute.
It's got a stamp on his wrist.
I know. It's a big, a big X so he can come back.
Re-entry.
I'm just going to go outside and have a smoke. I'll be back. Okay.
I love the idea they stamp your hand.
Frequent visitors card.
Yes. It's like a punch card. It's like a Subway card. The 10th visit's free.
Apologize to everybody hanging out with us live.
Joe's like,
oh my God.
Let's get to it, OG. All right. Anyway, so stacks on stacks on stacks. There are more. I think the $100 bill is the most popular bill in circulation, despite what we would imagine the one or whatever, because of the international usage of that. So it's a foot is like 12 stacks. 12 is like 120,000. You said 5,000 feet would be like 12 to that. So that'd be 500,000 million. It's more than 5,000. I'm going to say 5,001, and I'll take the over.
You took us through all of that, and then you said 5,001.
I better be right, because there was a lot of conversation to get to that.
For all that, I hope it's 4,999, or I hope it's 35. I hope it's 35.
35 would be epic. Yes, 35 feet.
That would be
5,000 5,000 seems light based on my quick math of.
We have 34 feet, 5,000 feet from Andy OG 5,001. We'd love to tell you who's right, and we will in just a second. All right, Erin, you started off with 34 feet. You feeling confident?
Not at all. I just wanted the attention off of me. So let me know how we did.
That might have gathered more attention than you anticipated. Andy, 5,000 feet seems like it was going really well at first.
Yeah, I did a careful calculation and came up with a perfectly round number.
And then somebody put a bump at the end of that. OG, feeling good?
Feeling great. Yep. I've got this one locked up.
My money's on OG right now.
Let's again, I hope it's 34 feet. I hope it's 34 feet. Doug got the answer. Doug?
Sure do, Joe. Hey there, stackers. I'm kitty mixologist and guy who's 24 kitchen tiles tall, Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug. There are currently 6 U.S. Mint locations, none of which have responded to my request to produce a Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug coin. I mean, geez, with all the new coins they make every year, it's not really that big of an ask, I think. Today's trivia question is, if you were to build a stack of all the Benjamins currently in circulation, how tall would that stack be? The answer? There are an estimated 18.5 billion $100 bills in circulation today. Not enough of which are in my possession, by the way. If you were bored enough to stack them all up into a single pile, they'd be taller than any building on Earth. So Erin already knows she lost.
Almost 34 feet tall. Nearly.
She guessed 34 feet. My garage is taller than that. And so she was under by 66,251 and a half feet. Andy guessed 5,000 feet. He was under by 61,285 and a half feet. OG guessed 5,001 feet. So he was under by 61,284 and a half. The answer, 66,285 and a half feet high, or 12 and a half miles. Erin, you were closer with your first guess, maybe.
That's what I was thinking.
For anyone at home who guessed in stories, we're just going to say it's well past cruising altitude, but that also means that OG is today's winner.
All right. OG gets back into circulation. How about that, Doug?
Clever.
Fantastic. You're welcome, everybody.
T2.
By the way, before we get back on this discussion, Erin, we were talking about the Roth IRA. I want to go to the Canadian version of that. I just think the TFSA is such a cleaner name. Like it's exactly what it's a tax-free. Say, how come we don't do that? Let's do that.
No, it's not well, ours isn't named after anybody, but the problem with the TFSA is people think it's a savings account. And so many people
of the
here,
SA, yeah.
Just like with the Roth, they'll transfer their money into it, but not actually purchase an investment with it. So it'll sit there just in cash and people will be like, I have a TFSA. And then I'm like, what's been the ROI? And then they look and they're like, it's actually made no money in 12 years. So I don't love the name TFSA.
TFIA, tax-free investment
should be
account.
Yes, that's what it should be called.
Yeah. The second half of this podcast is called sponsored by depositaccounts.com. You know why, Erin?
Why?
Because when you go to deposit, you said that very seriously. Because when you go to depositaccounts.com, you find out that brick and mortar bank that you're at might not have the best interest rate for your emergency fund. In fact, you can compare more than 275,000 deposit rates from over 11,000 banks and credit unions. Do it all for free. Savings accounts, CDs, checking, money markets, all at depositaccounts.com. Compare, ditch, switch, and save. Let's dive into now. Erin, now that you're good with money, Katie talks about how she likes a guy named Nick Majuli. Nick's been on the show. How she likes Nick's advice that maybe, if it's 0.01% of your net worth, don't be so judgy of yourself. And Katie goes, that's kind of good advice. Like give yourself, I'm going to spend this amount of money and I just don't care, so I'm going to maybe not track it, maybe not do whatever. She's not completely there though. How do you not drive yourself crazy and still be good with money?
Well, I think we have to just understand that it's not, money isn't fun or not fun. It's really up to you to decide if budgeting is fun. Like budgeting isn't fun when you're starting out and you're stressed and you're learning, but you can make it fun. Spending can be fun. You have to decide, right? All that's happening is we're just living out a series of patterns, all of us, all the time. We're just math equations, essentially. And so when you can understand that looking back on your spending for the last couple of months might be painful because it doesn't have the result that you want, when you can kind of understand what's been going on for you and you understand a little bit about the psychology behind why you make the decisions you make, then you can recognize that all that you've been doing is just living out a series of patterns. And so Then going forward, you can choose to create new patterns or continue some of the patterns that you've got. And if that means that spending in the past, or if you're stressed about money or you're feeling like it's too restrictive, well, that just means that's the pattern that you've been living out. And so instead now, what's a way we can create a new pattern? I think this is what she's trying to get to eventually. She's just not there yet. But it's like, what can we do now to make this feel fun so that I can both grow my wealth? Which, let me tell you, I've been on both sides of this thing, and everybody who's been on both sides of this says this. This is like one of the oldest phrases that's been around, and I didn't understand it before, but I understand it now, is when people say money doesn't buy you happiness. Everybody who's rich is like, it's sure a lot better than being broke, right? It's just a lot. Everybody who's been there understands that transition. So the happiness isn't because of the money or because of the budgeting or whatever. The happiness is because of what you choose to find your happiness in. And so if the way you've been approaching money is stressful, then yeah, I agree. Absolutely make those adjustments as you need to make them, but then create a pattern that for you, like what is going to feel like freedom and joy and happiness for you when it comes to money, and is going to achieve the ability for you to sustain that long term if you choose not to work in the future, and or create something for yourself now where you can so whether you automate it or whether you decide to be conscious about it, doesn't matter to me one way or another, as long as you're getting the outcome that you want. But if it's a matter of, like you were saying, travel or food, or in my case, chai tea lattes from Starbucks, right? It's like I get an unlimited amount of those. They bring me so much joy every time I drink one, the first sip especially, right? It's magic. And so why would I should or shame myself when it comes to that if it's bringing me joy? So I think you just have to look at, like, what are the patterns of the spending that you're doing that are allowing you to feel this way, and then just make those adjustments, because it actually has nothing to do with the tracking of the money. It has to do with the patterns and the relationship and the psychology behind why you're making the decisions you're making.
But Andy, I think it's easy to get behind what Erin's saying, but I also think that there's this, there's this thing that it's so hard for people to change. Like, there's got to be this pattern interrupt, right? This like, I feel like smack over the head, or this thing. Like, how do you, if you know that you need to change, you can tell yourself that all day, and yet still every time that you're not, you go spend a money that wasn't in your budget, and that's, what you think makes you good with money, you still freak out. Like, how do you interrupt that pattern and make that change?
Yeah, I think that you do have to take like a step back and define like what type of person you are. And I think from reading the article, I think that Katie is a saver. Like, she was doing pretty well without paying attention to where every dollar was going. And then she started kind of torturing herself, seeing where every cent is going and feeling like, oh my gosh, if I buy a coffee, or if I buy this taco, like, that $5 could be worth how much, like, in 40 years. So I think you have to know where you are. Like, are you a saver? Are you a spender? Are you the avoider? Are you the planner? And kind of get an understanding of, like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the things that you need to change? Because then you can start looking at the pattern interrupt and say, all right, well, what is it that I need interrupting? And what is it that I need to continue doing? I think when it comes to money, usually, like, it doesn't have to be as complicated as most of us make it, right? I mean, there are books, there are blogs, there are podcasts and YouTube videos that we can watch, but ultimately it boils down to some pretty fundamental principles. And if you boil it down to the basics, it's just like, spend within your means. Like, don't spend more than you make. And then the dollars that you're saving, have an emergency fund. Invest that money so that it's working for you while you're sleeping. I think some of those basic lessons, like, I've talked to many financial independence, retire early people on Inspired Money. And I think in the process of trying to save as much money as possible, like, that can be stressful. But once they've accumulated enough and achieved some level of financial independence, the funny thing is that many of the people say that they actually think about money a lot less than they ever did. They're like, once I know that I have enough, I'm actually thinking about money not that frequently. Like, That's the goal. Like that's money nirvana.
Dude, I would start with your taco budget. You're paying too much for tacos with $5 a piece, man. You should be able to do a taco for like $2.25 at least.
I'm on the East Coast. I got to go to California or Mexico. Then I'll be all set.
Doug gets all neurotic when he pays $5 for a taco.
I'm paying New York prices.
That better be a really freaking big taco.
Andy, it's funny because, you make me think of our contributor, Paula, who's not here today, but Paula talks about like the anti-budget, right? Once you have enough money and you're going to be okay, it's set aside all the money that you need to reach your goal and just spend the rest. Like don't worry about it, just spend the rest. It sounds like you're on that train.
Yeah, I think that once once you're following certain principles and you're not spending more than you earn, I think that's true. I mean, for most people, it's much easier to think about like today and tomorrow. It's harder to think 30 years into the future. But I think that you do have to have a balance where you're living for today because we don't know how many years we have ahead, right? So you do have to live in the moment, but at the same time, you need to plan for the future. And you're trying to walk that balance all the time.
Oh, gee, I just get the feeling, when somebody is this neurotic person that Katie's talking about, I think that they are overemphasizing the currency of money, but they're underemphasizing the currency of time. Like, how do you get these super savers saving for a future, way over saving for a future that may never happen because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow? How do you help them change and maybe relax a little bit and not be so miserable because of their good habit?
I think that if you're a really good saver, it's very hard to turn into a really good spender. And if you're a really good spender, it's hard to turn into a really good saver. So in both of those cases, you have to figure out ways to trick yourself to do the other thing, whether it's forcing yourself to go on vacation when you've accumulated a certain amount of, financial net worth or whatever, or if you're a really good spender and you have to automate and force yourself to save money by, putting in, setting up your 401k and setting up auto increases every 6 months so that you get to the spot where you have to trick yourself into the behavior that you want to have or the outcome that you want while still acknowledging, the behavior and the person that you really are. This really ultimately boils down to, I think, having a really good understanding of what it is that you're trying to accomplish and having very crystal clear outcomes in mind. When you're just blindly saving money with no particular outcome, you're never going to have enough, because until you're quite literally the richest person in the world, there's always somebody that has more than you. And just like we talk about investment performance and that outperformance of an index is not a financial goal. Your financial plan dictates the investment return that your portfolio needs to reach the goals that you want. Like, who gives a crap what the S&P does? Now, I think you got to know that so that you can decide whether or not you're, doing, you're in the same ballpark of what you should be expecting. But by the same token, like if you're just comparing your investment returns to an index, you're never going to be happy with that, because that's not a goal. Portfolio outperformance isn't a goal. Just like accumulating money for no purpose at the end of the day is not a financial goal. And we see people who are hardcore into the FIRE movement and really focused on, I just want to accumulate money. I just want to save money. I just want to save money. I just want to save it. And it's like, I always just say, for what? What are you trying to do? Because once you can put a timeline on it and a dollar amount and something that is on the back end of it, now you can figure out what you have to do on a day-to-day basis to reach it. And then when you're done, when you've accomplished it, and you can move on to the next thing, the next, inspiring thing that you want to work on. I don't understand why people would want to, and I've said this before, like accumulate millions and millions of dollars and never take their kids to Disney. Disney is the most like ludicrous use of money in the history of mankind.
Disney is not going to be a sponsor.
I think they would be a great sponsor because
maybe he's saying to go though, Andy. He's saying
I'm
go.
100%
It's
saying
expensive
to go.
and worth it.
I'm saying
That's
like
true.
It's so insanely expensive. We've been a number of times. I have the same recurring. Joe drinks the Disney Kool-Aid.
I got all the Kool-Aid in my cup. I'm showing people on YouTube. I've got a Disney cup I'm drinking from even.
I drink
the Disney Kool-Aid.
I have the recurring nightmare when we go to Disney that the bill is so thick they cannot stuff it under the door. Because in the old school days they used to slide the bill under the door.
Is the bill more than 34 feet tall?
And they have to knock on the door and wake me up at 3 a.m. and they're like, "Here you go, sir." And it's like in this padded envelope. Like, oh my God, kids, get your stuff. We have to sneak out. They'll
And
never
luckily,
catch
they
us.
only come close every time you're there. They come this close. Yeah.
Yeah. And now with the little magic band, you're like, ba-ding, ba-ding, ba-ding. But my point is that it's a terrible use of money. If you ask any financial expert, right? Should I go to Disney? Should I go stay at the such and such a resort and spend $150 a day times a family of 5 plus all the food and trinkets? And so, of course not. It's a terrible use of money. Now do it times 5 because you're there for a week. No. And then I have to travel. And should I fly in the front of the plane or the back of the plane? Oh my God, are you kidding me? This is a ridiculous.
G won't go in the back with the heathens.
No,
Good
of course
thing we don't
not.
have experts on this show.
Yeah. My point is, versus you're 85 years old and you've never taken your kids or grandkids to Disney, but by God, you've got 15 million in your IRA. Aren't you so successful? Look at how great I am. Look at how successful I am. It's like, really? You didn't have that time. You didn't have that experience. I'm not just using Disney as a metaphor. It doesn't have to be your thing, but money has a purpose, and the purpose of it is it's an expression of your involvement and community and your love for other people and the people around you. And you use that to manifest those things. And if all you're doing is just being like, yeah, I don't know. I just, I got a pay raise. I just save more money in my 401k. I just save more money. I just save more money. Gross. So have a goal. That's my biggest thing with all of this is if you've got an idea of what you're aiming for, then you can build the stuff around it. And then you don't have all the stress about the other things like Paula's anti-budget or, whatever excites you around that stuff you can do and not feel guilty. We talk a little bit about freedom from and freedom to, right? It's like, this is freedom to do the things that you want and freedom from all the stress that comes with money because money is stressful, whether you got $100 of it or $100 million of it. It's just, there's always some sort of baggage.
I like this. I like this discussion because it addresses something we don't talk much about. And there's this whole group of people that suffer from this. So I'm glad you guys were all here to help us. Also, this piece not only surprised me, the fact that we got into discussion about what's the name, Doug, of the Pokemon thing?
Jiggly Snufflepuff.
Jiggly Snuffle Upagus. Yes. Yeah. Whatever that is. We got that in too. We got a couple things on the bingo card today. That's great. I want to find out what's happening where all of you are before we say goodbye, because I love your brilliance and I think that our stackers could learn so much from you like they have already. Let's start off. Actually, we're going to do our guest of honor last. OG, what do you got going on this weekend after Memorial Day weekend?
Sharpening the saw this weekend. And by that, I mean on the golf game, because we have a big brotherly golf tournament this coming week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
You know what that means, Doug?
Our goal is to not finish last.
Steak Brother's going to carry him again.
No, that means he's practicing throwing a club into the swamp.
Yes.
Doug knows a thing or two about that.
He's seen how far he can throw the club.
I've heard the whoosh, 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 whoosh right past my head several times.
The impressive thing is that he found part of the club, allegedly.
Oh, yeah. I have one framed.
Andy, thanks so much for joining us, man. What's coming up on Inspired Money?
Thanks for having me. So Inspired Money, lots of cool things. I mentioned we have the future of work coming up, navigating the changing landscape.
Maybe a discussion. Is there a discussion about AI in there?
Probably, yes. I think it will definitely include some AI. We've got the art of giving back, creative ways to make a difference. And then after that, classics reimagined, restoration and resurrections in the car collecting world.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so as a Detroit guy, it's pretty
a
awesome.
Religious experience about to happen.
Found only on the Inspired Money podcast. And people want to hit that live if they want to watch it live. Is there a set time every week?
It seems to be changing all the time. It's supposed to be 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern. More and more often, it's 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. It seems to work better earlier in the day. That way I can get guests who are actually in the on the other side of the pond in Europe, and it's not midnight over there. And then it's like West Coast, East Coast.
Everybody wins.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. We haven't had anyone from Asia yet. I don't know how that's going to work out.
1 a.m. I mean, it's a sacrifice, but it's worth it because they're on Inspired Money. Duh.
You got to pay a price.
Yeah, I know, right? So I think the best thing to do then is subscribe to your YouTube channel, and they'll get a notification that you're going live.
Subscribe at Inspired Money.
Yes. Thank you. We'll have a link on our show notes page. Erin, so great to see you again. So great to talk about Snuffleupagus and whatever the heck we talked about there. But
yeah, I can't wait to get my stamp at the House of Ill Repute next time I go. Right. So excited.
Big money saver. Big money saver.
Just tell them Doug sent you. They'll be like, oh yeah, come on in.
I do Pokemon battles there.
I'm always recommending your two kick-ass books to everybody. But I always, because I'm always focused on the books and the fact that you're an author, I don't tell people about what's going on in the podcast, what's happening at the Get the Hell Out of Debt podcast.
I'm so excited. This week I get to talk to Jillian Lee, who got the hell out of debt about 5 years ago or so. And so we had her on the podcast right after she paid off $300,000 in debt after, doing the thing. But on that podcast, she said, I'm going to be retired in 10 years. And she actually messaged us about a couple weeks ago and said, I'm actually retired now. It took 5 years instead of 10. So we're going to interview her and catch up with her and find out how she continued to implement the teachings and do all the things in order to get where she is now. And she is somebody who is living life on her terms, like her happiness and doing the retirement the way she designed it. So I can't wait to catch up with her.
Isn't it so cool seeing success stories like that?
Yes. I know. I'm a proud mama.
I know you are.
I wish. Yeah, I really am. All of the people who've come through and done all the cool things that we talked to, I just, some people like cry during Old Yeller, and like I cry when people pay off their debt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, good for you. I'm so proud. Like because I know what it's like and I know how hard it is. And so I am a proud mama.
I would much rather cry because somebody got out of debt than my dog was dead.
Right.
We were doing so well, Joe. What are you doing?
Old Yeller. Oh, was that spoiler? I'm sorry. That was an old movie. Does nobody not know that's what happens at the end of that movie?
Wait,
I don't know.
What happens?
That's right. He is Luke's father. That's, I think, the way that ends. All right. And we will find the Get the Hell Out of Debt podcast. We'll find the Inspired Money Show on our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com, plus Erin's two awesome books that I absolutely love. Doug, I guess you got it from here, man. What should be on our to-do list after that? I can't wait to hear what's on our to-do list.
Of the hundreds of things that I could have put, here's what should be stacked up on our to-do list for today. First, take some advice from Andy. Track your spending for a few months to get a handle on where your biggest issues are. Then you can start to limit just certain areas of your life instead of your entire life. Wished I knew that a long time ago. Second, don't forget what Erin said. The two most impactful tools you have are your balance sheet and your budget. They'll tell you where you are and where you're going. But the biggest to do? I got to update my tile height on the dating apps. I know that's information the ladies like to have up front. Thanks to Andy Wang for joining us today. You can find his podcast, Inspired Money, wherever you're listening to me right now. We'll also include links in our show notes at stackingbenjamins.com. Thanks to Erin Skye Kelly for joining us today. You can find her latest book, Naked Money Meetings. Ending money fights with your partner forever, wherever books are sold. Damn, I want to read that one. Thanks also to OG for joining us today. Looking for good financial planning help? Head to stackingbenjamins.com/OG for his calendar. This show is the property of SB Podcasts, LLC, copyright 2024, and is created by Joe Saul-Sehy. Our producer is Karen Refine. Karen and Joe get help from a few of our neighborhood friends. You'll find out about our awesome team at stackingbenjamins.com, along with the show notes and how you can find us on YouTube and all the usual social media spots. Come say hello. Oh yeah, and before I go, not only should you not take advice from these nerds, don't take advice from people you don't know. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, speak with a real financial advisor. I'm Joe's mom's neighbor, Doug, and we'll see you next time back here at the Stacking Benjamin Show.